first time that we're actually putting together an alumni panel after we've been thinking about it for about 10 years. So thank you very much to the alums who agreed to come and talk and give us some insight into beyond that last internship that you do as a graduate or an undergraduate student, what happens then. So as you know, this program was called Museum Careers, Pathways to Success with an MA degree. And I'm going to just introduce each of the people now. And I'm going to ask you if you would come up and speak at the podium, because it's probably easier to project if you're standing up than sitting at a table. And then after each of the speakers has told you his or her life story in terms of career issues, we'll have questions and answers. So the speakers are, as you know from the flyer, Susan Breitkopf, who is Director of Corporate, Foundation, and Associate Relations at the National Building Museum, and who graduated with her MA in 1998. Paul Ruther, who is Docent Coordinator at the Sackler-Fear Gallery, who also graduated in 1998. And have you seen each other since then?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, good.
We're friends.
Good. Olivia Kohler-Maga, who is Assistant Director at the Luther W. Brady Gallery at GWU, who graduated in 2006. And Elizabeth Wilson-Christopher, who is now the Rights and Reproductions Coordinator at the Archives of American Art at the Smithsonian Institution, who graduated in 2012. So Susan Breitkopf is going to speak first, and that's all the introduction I'm going to do. So please welcome her.
So it was a very winding path that got me to museums from my time at American. So basically what I want to start out by saying is that I always say that I went into journalism for the money. But how did I get there? So while I was at AU, I thought I really wanted to be a museum curator. But then I had this life in DC that I really liked. I had a guy who had asked me to marry him, and I didn't want to move away from him or to Sheboygan to make $20,000 a year at a museum. So I found I had a little bit of a background in journalism, and so I thought I would go into arts journalism, but that didn't exactly happen. I found a job at the Washington Post editing books, and I did because that's what you do when you have a master's in art history. But it ended up being the first of one of many unexpected jobs for me. So nothing, every time I planned on now I'm gonna get this kind of job or that kind of job, opportunities presented themselves. And I kind of just seized them instead of saying, no, I'm not gonna do that because that's not in my plan. I just kind of went in the direction that the universe was taking me. So from the Post, I had a series of newspaper jobs. I worked at a footwear publication. I worked at a community newspaper. And then a job came up at what was then the American Association of Museums, now the American Alliance of Museums, to be an editor. And suddenly, everything in my career made sense. So all of a sudden, people stopped asking me, why do you have a master's in art history? And they kind of expected that I would have that kind of degree, so that was good. So I stayed there for about 10 years, and and that was for a number of reasons. I kept kind of, I kept kind of going where things took me. So anytime somebody left, I would raise my hand and say, I'd like to try that. So I started as a newsletter editor, and then the magazine editor left, and I raised my hand and I said, I really want to do that. And so I edited the magazine for a number of years, which also provided me a really stable base to start a family. So I had a couple of children, and I had a job that was interesting enough but didn't kind of overwhelm my time and enabled me to have small children. And then after a while, after my daughter was about a year old, I was kind of getting a little antsy, and I said, I've been doing this journalism thing for a while. I'd like to try something else. So people in marketing left, and I raised my hand again, and I said, I'd really like to try that. So I started doing more and more marketing and communications and started the organization's social media presence, and got a lot of really great experience that way. And after a while doing that, I got antsy again, and I had worked over those years really closely with the development department, and kind of really got interested in the way, I think when I was at AU, I was like, that's disgusting. I'm never going to touch anything to do with money. And then as mutually beneficial a sponsorship could be. So people in development left, because that's what they do. They constantly turn over. And I raised my hand again, and I wrote a proposal of how I would take on these responsibilities. And the COO liked it, and she gave me a chance, and then I started off down that road. I got a few years under my belt, and then not found myself. Through a bunch of networking, I met the VP of Development at the National Building Museum, and we really clicked, and she offered me a job doing corporate and foundation relations, which is where I am now. It's really great. It's kind of like, for a long time, I stalked the Building Museum because it's really where I wanted to work, so persistence really paid off. But so, kind of like tying everything together, what I really just wanted to impart was that I think at the beginning of my career, I didn't realize, I thought you pick a path and you stick with it, and that's the only way. Like, you have to do that. And what I realized later is that careers, when you talk to somebody who's, you know, at the end of their career, and they have the most interesting stories about how they were a lion tamer, or, you know, they worked in organic gardening, and you're like, how did you do that? And you're the creative director at something. But those stories are really common. So career paths are super circuitous, and, you know, which is fine. Second, it's okay to let up on the gas in your career at some point. So, you know, whether it's to focus on something at home, or have children, or, you know, do any number of things. You know, you don't have to stop completely, but you can let up on the gas a little bit, and take a few years to just settle. And then 3, definitely take a chance and raise your hand. So if you're working somewhere and you see that there's a gap or there's a need, you know, just write it up, talk about what you would do, take a meeting with whoever you need to, and take that leave. And then also just network. Like, it can't be said enough. Even if you think that you aren't good at it, if, you know, you're worried about rejection, just do it, because that's really the only way. People don't really get jobs from job ads, and I'm sure you've heard it before, but it bears repeating. And that's really kind of how opportunities came up for me, is just flat through people. It wasn't just completely happenstance. So that is my
Can you tell us a little bit about what you actually do?
Oh,
Is that not publicly available information?
complete secret. I have to kill everybody in this room.
Okay, I won't do that yet.
So what I do at the Building Museum is corporate foundation and association relations. So the association part I'm going to leave alone, because that's really unique just to the Building Museum, because we have an audience of professionals who work in the built environment, so construction companies and developers, and we raise money from them, which most museums, they don't have that. And we do a little bit of like professional development for them. But really, corporate and foundation relations is pretty common in a museum setting. And so I raise money from companies that are both interested in our public audience, the families and whatnot, and then also in reaching the professionals as well. And then foundation, I oversee a grant writer who writes grants for government and private and family foundations. So.
And you had that wonderful show this summer with the beach.
The beach was, it was crazy. It was really crazy. We had, the summer before, we had done the maze. I don't know if anybody got a chance to go to that. And that was the biggest summer crowd that we'd ever had before, at 50,000 people. The beach, we got 182,000. We were completely unprepared for that many people, and it was, all of us were doing whatever we had to clean, to staff, and so, you know, I was out there vacuuming a lot of mornings because, like, somebody had to clean up, and also, people are disgusting. Like, it is really unfathomable what they leave behind.
Did you get to keep one of those little plastic balls?
I have several.
Just one.
And you can go to DuPont Underground, and you can, eventually, there's going to be an artist competition to use all the balls, so.
Oh, that's great.
They live on, yeah.
They live on.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
That's great. Mr. Ruther.
Well done, Sue. Making me a hard act to follow. One thing she said about networking that's very true is when Sue was editor for the American Alliance of Museums, she came up with an idea to bring new voices into the profession and have them publish articles and reviews in the AAM magazine. And one of them was me. So it is important to network. So my career path is even more convoluted, circuitous, maybe even bizarre than Sue's. I started out actually needing graduate school to get a job in museums, but I had been in museums as a docent for 10 years before I applied and was accepted at AU. So I had been a docent at the Hirshhorn Museum, and then a docent at the Phillips Collection. When I was at the Hirshhorn, I was a volunteer. At the Phillips Collection, they pay you, I think, $35 a tour. And then if you do like in the evenings, it's $50. That's what they paid me when I started there in 1990. And that's what they paid me when I left there in 2013. Or rather, that's what I paid that's what they paid gallery educators, as they're called. So I had all this experience, but there was no way, I found out very quickly, no way I could get a job in a museum without going to graduate school. And happily, I chose this program and had 2 wonderful years here, studying with Dr. Gerard, Dr. Browdy, Dr. Langa. And then I was able to get an internship at the Smithsonian American Art Museum. That was through AU, so it paid off very, very nicely. From the internship, I became a curatorial assistant working on the artist George Catlin. I don't know. I think he's in your canon here at AU, right? George Catlin, American art, yeah. So I was like the George Catlin 24/7 research assistant for the curatorial department. Yep. It's all Catlin all the time. And it was a great job, but it was temporary. And what I learned about being in the curatorial department at the Smithsonian American Art Museum was that the path that was expected is you would take this temporary research job, you'd work very, very hard, and then you would go to some place like Muskegon or Sheboygan or some small town somewhere in the hinterlands, pay your dues for 8 or 10 years, and then if you were lucky, come back to Washington, New York, Boston, etc. I had a wife and family in DC at the time, so that wasn't tenable. So I did quite a few things in sort of the raise your hand category, try new things. I became a curatorial assistant for a science exhibition put on by a science research foundation called the Carnegie Institution of Washington. I knew very little about science, but I learned a lot and helped put together an exhibition, and I got to do registrarial duties, I got to do design. It sort of broadened my outlook. Mind you, I'm still a docent at the Phillips Collection while I'm doing all this. $35 a tour, job number 2, job number 3. And then a position opened up at the Phillips Collection. That was 2003, so I'd been out of school for 5 years. It was sort of entry level in the education department, but they knew me because I'd been a docent there. And of course I had this great degree from AU, and I was hired into that department and then worked on teaching kits and public programs, essentially transformed myself from a curator persona to an educator. And that's what I do today at the Freer-Sackler. So I was at the Phillips for 2 years as public programs coordinator, 8 years as manager of school and teacher programs, focusing on museum-school partnerships, engaging students in arts integration, trying to spread art across the curriculum, a whole variety of tasks, working with schools, teachers, students, and integrating that into the museum. I was very happy there for a long time, but then I wanted to change, and a job was opened up at the Freer-Sackler, working with their docent program. Docents are a big deal at that museum. They have about 70. They are really the front line of interpretation. So I kind of went full circle from being a docent to managing a docent program. And I recently got a title change. This is the first time I've been able to say this. I'm now manager of docent programs. So this is different from being a docent coordinator in terms of my relationship with them, but nonetheless, important thing. And I guess one thing I've learned along the way internships are vital, volunteering is vital. Whatever you can do to get your foot in the door and spend time in museums. As an educator, it's pretty important to try to know something about your audience. So just out of curiosity, how many of you are interested in working in museums?
They're
Okay.
here.
Okay, so how many in curatorial? Okay, education? Anything you could get, it wouldn't matter what. What else? What other sort of
Registrar.
registrar? Mm-hmm.
Development.
Maybe like publications.
Yeah, publications. Okay, so generally speaking, the best thing to do is get an internship and take every opportunity you can. Try to think of things that your supervisor doesn't have a chance to think of, because everybody in museums is crazy busy. Any project you get, any opportunity you get, think it through and how can this be made better. Show initiative, take initiative, be assertive but not aggressive, and opportunities generally arise. Networking is wonderful, knowing everybody that you can is a great thing to do, but most museums hire people they know. And if you're interning, volunteering, etc., that tends to be the best practice. I don't know how many former interns we hired at the Phillips Collection because they had proven themselves in a variety of ways. So, you know, it's not the most original advice, but it's good advice. It works pretty well. Okay.
Thank you.
Anything
You
else
did
I
a lot
should
of
cover?
writing too. I mean, I remember you sent me those notebooks full of, didn't you develop a lot of that curriculum material?
Yeah.
Could you talk just a little bit about that?
Sure. So one of the things I did at the Phillips Collection was produce teacher resources. And at the time, the museum was interested in these elaborate, beautiful teaching kits, we called them, that would help teachers integrate art across the curriculum. Most of our audience was not art teachers. These social studies teachers, language arts teachers, even the occasional math and science teacher, foreign language teachers, teachers in the performing arts. So how to adapt an artist to the teacher's needs, and thinking about things like local, national standards of learning. Teachers need to justify why they're coming to the museum. At the same time, you want to make this art interesting and accessible to them and treat them as adult learners. So I was the main writer for the Jacob Lawrence and the Migration Series teaching kit that was produced by the Phillips Collection, that's published, and you know, has a Library of Congress number and all of that, and my name's on it. I really feel very good about that. So it involved original research, you know, making connections between, let's say, Jacob Lawrence's sources from the Italian Renaissance, a Botticelli in the Met that he saw when he was in high school, and then how that could be related to his paintings in the Migration Series, as well as thinking very practical things like, if I'm a third grade geometry teacher, how is Jacob Lawrence's art relevant to me? So geometric forms, ratios of colors, how the panels were divided up. There are ways to make this work more accessible for a teacher, not just in terms of being interesting to them, but how they can use it in the classroom. So I did a great deal of writing about that.
And it seems like you had to do a lot of self-education too, because even though you learned some of that in my classes, you obviously learned more.
I didn't learn about the math.
I was going to say, there's a reason why.
Yeah. I guess this would go along with Sue's point about raising your hand and taking opportunities. If I had balked, I suppose, and said, you know, I find what teachers do really boring. I don't want to read about these standards of learning. I don't want to have to sort of think about what they need. I really just love the art, and I just want to get closer to it. I'd have been unemployed, I guess. Or maybe I'd been, you know, I don't know what I would have done. But part of it is just sort of being willing to learn from other people's perspectives and to make museums and art more accessible in a variety of ways. And that's generally easier when you have a sense of how people can connect to the art. Art history is a wonderful path into understanding art and culture, but it's not the only path. So it was sort of identifying those other paths, and without compromising emphasizing art history or scholarship, making it relevant.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh.
That's good. Olivia.
Okay, I'm going to apologize first. My allergies are trying to kill me this year, so I'm a little nasal. But I'll try to project as much as possible.
Thank you.
So already, thank you so much for inviting me to participate. I already learned something from both presentations that went by. And I'm about to prove Paul's talk completely correct, because so my career path, started by doing as many internships as humanly possible and volunteering in as many places as possible as I could. So I did it both in undergrad and grad school. In undergrad, I did a publications internship at the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts. I followed that up with a PR internship there. I worked at the Drawing Center in New York for a summer, doing a very typical arts kind of gallery internship. I got coffee, answered phones, ran lots of just errands all over the place. I almost lost the curator's cat once. Got her back though, and we're still friends. And but then I also got to work alongside the publications, people there, the curators. I got to install a show with an artist. I got to clear out an artist's studio with him. And they had this kind of great flat file program at the Drawing Center too, so I got to kind of work with all sorts of artists that are coming in and listen to the curators talk about their work and just hear about that. So I did that, and then I went to the University of Richmond, so I worked pretty much all 4 years in their museums. I started as just a gallery sitter. I went on to gallery assistant, on to research assistant, and then my final year, or summer there, I got a fellowship to research a recent group of prints, and then I co-curated an exhibition out of it. Then I came up here to AU, and I volunteered at the Women's Museum in their membership and development office. I volunteered for their gala. I think I stuffed about 300 or 350 IKEA watering cans with small vodka bottles for the gala. And then I did the SAM internship that was through AU that a lot of people did. I worked first for the Luce Center, so it was when it was closed actually, so I never was in the building that's open. And I wrote labels, did research, did for the Luce Center, and then I worked in the curatorial office there, and I did a lot of research for pieces that were about to go on view. So I researched the Harry Bertoia piece that is up in the sculpture, or was up, it might have just come down, up in the sculpture hall, and the Louis Comfort Tiffany window, and then I did a piece of furniture that was there right when they began, so here, table. But, so that's what I did first, just still while I was in school, and then right out of grad school, I don't think I had even finished one thesis at that time. I applied for my GW job. There was a job just kind of popped up on a listing somewhere. I applied for it as an assistant curator position. It paid nothing, and I applied for it and got it. And so I've been at GW actually for 10 years there, but I have kind of steadily moved up, and I'm now the assistant director at the gallery.
And they pay you, right?
They do actually pay me. It's very nice. But a lot of the kind of moving up came from what Susan was talking about, kind of raising my hand, being like, sure, I can do that budget. I definitely learned about that in grad school. I'll do the exhibit budget. So I did that, and now I do the whole budget for the gallery, along with the endowments and any development budget that comes in. I do a lot of research and writing. I do my own curatorial projects. So I was telling Dr. Langer earlier, I did a couple years ago a show called What Not to Wear on women's sculpture. I'm working on a show on a woman named Minnie Clavens, who's a painter, that will hopefully go in the Corcoran when we finally move over there. And I work on everyone else's shows there as well.
How big is the staff there?
So it's pretty small. There are 2 full-time people. There's the director, myself. There's part-time person who is also an AU alum. And then we
That's
have...
called the AU Mafia.
Yeah, I know, we all just kind of get together. And actually, one of my first gallery assistants there, we also have gallery assistants that are GW students, went on to go to the program and then graduated. And so we're all kind of all over the place. What was I gonna say? So I wear many hats, and kind of, my unofficial job description is whatever everyone else doesn't do. Because obviously the director has her priorities, and then the part-time person isn't always there, and then students have to go to class. So I do pretty much everything that just needs to get done at any time. So while I really get to do really great projects and do my own research, like yesterday I was trying to finish a grant proposal that I'm writing right now, and I had to collate a whole bunch of things that had to go off with the director to a meeting because they weren't ready in time for the gallery assistant to do it. So, I mean, it happens in a small organization a lot, but you do get a lot of opportunity to kind of move around and try new things there. So yeah, I just mentioned I'm writing a grant application. That's kind of my new, I'll try that. Mm-hmm. So we really need money for our sculpture collection. I was like, that sounds like a really great idea. We'll try to do that. And I just realized yesterday when I was talking to my husband, I was like, it's not that strange that I'd be interested in grant writing, because a lot of what I do in writing exhibit text and writing an exhibit essay has to do with, writing a narrative and being persuasive and trying to tell people what you're trying to convey, and exact same skills that you're using in grant writing. Mm-hmm. So I thought that was kind of this interesting way of thinking about it. So I guess I was just trying to think about some things I could kind of impart. So I went really quickly as to how I got my job. I applied for it, saw it, applied for it, got it. It seems really easy. And it seems, I used to say I was just in the right place at the right time. And that is not true. I was lucky that it did not come up in the middle of the semester and I had to figure out how to, drop classes and such. But if you think about it, I had just come off comps, so I was probably as well-versed in Western art history as I possibly could be at that moment. I had every single person I knew read my cover letter and my resume, so there were absolutely no mistakes when it came through. When I got an interview, I prepared like crazy for it. I researched the institution, I did practice questions, I thought about great answers for them. I researched all their past exhibition history for 5 years. I thought about people who might know everyone else in there, and I name dropped, and which is also, it's fairly important to kind of make those connections. And then I also brought with me to my interview a whole booklet of all of the writing I had done for exhibits, labels and brochures and everything. And the director once told me, she's like, you got the job because I could tell you cared. And so that really kind of showed me that just all that hard work was really important. And then I guess also kind of off of Susan too, I thought your career, you have to just remember that your career is more than your job. And so a lot of careers take these kind of funny paths, and you can be in a job but then also be fulfilling your passions and working on something else outside of it. So in addition to what I do in the gallery, I've also kind of raised my hand and been like, yeah, I definitely want to contribute to that catalog. I'll completely research that woman and write your entry for you. I'd love to curate that little group of sculptures for the auction. I'd love to work with you on at the Art League and kind of pick pieces for that show. So it's just a lot of raising your hand and trying to make those connections. Definitely networking, and that's how you find those sorts of little jobs out there, which are always kind of fun. And I actually want to talk to Paul later because I have some things I think about.
Thank you very much. Sure. And our newest MA graduate.
Hello, my name is Elizabeth Wilson Christopher. I graduated in December 2012. And like everyone else, I I've taken a very circuitous path to get to where I am today. I'm currently the Rights and Reproductions Coordinator at the Archives of American Art at the Smithsonian Institution. I know that at least for one of my papers, Dr. Lenga required that we utilize the archives resources, so some of you all might be familiar with what we do and the services that we offer. So at the Archives of American Art, I kind of handle everything that has to do with intellectual property. Now, intellectual property covers a lot of different things, but mainly in the visual arts, it's going to have to do with copyright. Who owns the intellectual rights to something they created? So that's a field that came up a lot during my previous career experience, and I'll talk a little bit more about it. But within the context of the archives, how that fits into what I do. First, I coordinate all the rights and reproductions activities for the manuscripts. That's going to be letters, documents, that sort of thing, photographs, collection, audio-visual materials we have. That's going to be videos, interviews, things like that. And then we also have our world-famous, as I'll call it, oral history program, which for decades has done extensive interviews with both major and minor figures within American art.
Many of which are online now.
Many of which are online, and if the audio is not online, it's going to be the transcripts are online. A very good resource for any of your papers, and it'll save you a trip to the archives, even though we're just right downtown. So in coordinating all of that, my main position goes into organizing all the transactions where people want to use or reproduce something that we have in our archives. We have millions of items in our archives and thousands of collections of artists and gallery owners and scholars' papers. So when somebody wants to reproduce one of those items, be it in a book, a film, a documentary, a magazine, a website, anything like that, they have to come through me. And basically what I do, once they've submitted their requests, I will go and I'll research and see if we already have digital versions of things that I can just deliver to them. That's very easy. But the fun part of my job is when we don't have things digitized and I get to go on a little scavenger hunt and utilize all the research skills I got here at AU to try and find the materials that they want. Some of our collections are processed, which means they have finding aids, everything's very nicely organized in folders and have titles and everything, and some things are not. Some things we have 10 boxes of stacked materials, layers of material, and it's kind of like an archaeological dig to find that one letter someone wants to reproduce or something like that. So I get to dig through the archives and find the primary source materials that they want to reproduce. And then after that, I will go and provide item level cataloging on those items. So what that means is that I will enter into our database, which is much like MDID. Anybody use MDID?
We don't anymore.
You don't use MDID?
No, we can talk about
Okay.
that later. It's
Well,
been swallowed up by Art Store.
I just aged myself, so.
No, it was just this year.
It's 3 long years ago that I graduated. But basically it's a collections management database, and I will go in and enter in all the primary information about it, do a little bit of research to kind of flesh out that record, and work with other members of the archives to not only deliver that item that the scholar or researcher, family member, curious, random patron that they want, and kind of, it's working in concert with everyone. I really do, in my position, I'm not cordoned off from other departments. I work with the curatorial and collecting staff. I work with the director's office. I work with, I'm part of the reference team, so I will field some reference questions as well. I kind of hit every little part of the archives. The other aspect of my job, other than doing the coordination of the reproductions, is I do help the staff kind of navigate through the quagmire that is currently copyright and fair use within the visual arts. I'll talk a little bit in my previous positions how I got that experience. But they will come to me and say, do we need to go to this artist to get permission, or can we claim fair use, or what does the person who donated their collections to us, is it okay with them to reproduce this in this sort of way, and that sort of thing. So that's also another main facet of my job. So with all that being said, that's what I do now. But my undergraduate degree is from Mary Washington in Fredericksburg. I was a double major in studio art and art history. I started out as a studio major thinking, why are they making me take these 3 credits of art history? This is ridiculous. Quickly discovered the wonderful field of study of Italian Baroque art, and fell in love and made art history then the main focus of my undergraduate degree. And once I got out, I had a quick internship at a small commercial gallery in Richmond. It didn't really amount to anything. Sometimes internships do that. You do them, you never see the people again, it's fine. And it's not generally the case, but occasionally it does happen. But I found myself slightly disenchanted after that, and worked a number of different jobs, everything from an adoption specialist at the SPCA, to a door girl at a bar, to finally ending up working for Apple Computers. So I did that for 4 years after undergrad, and what I did there was helping people learn how to use their computers. I would sit down with them one-on-one and teach them how to get the best experience they could and get comfortable with technology. And that actually ended up being a completely invaluable experience, because it got me comfortable speaking with the general public. It got me comfortable just talking to people without them engaging me. I had to completely engage someone else. And also it gave me the experience with technology as well. After 4 years though, I became disenchanted with working retail, as you tend to do. And I decided I wanted to go back to studying art history. So I looked at several different graduate schools, and I happily ended up with AU, and that was in August of 2010. And at that point I had a work study at the Visual Resources Center. So I was doing that, I was doing full course load, and through the Visual Resources Center I found out about an opportunity at the National Gallery of Art. And it was a student assistantship. I did get paid, which was very nice. I worked there about 20 to 30 hours a week. And basically there I was working on, and it was very similar to the work that I was doing at the Visual Resources Center. That was, I helped to digitize and catalog collections, kind of like what you do in the Visual Resources Center with, I did some work with the slides, but mainly the digitization of the images from the books, providing that little bit of cataloging. And then at the National Gallery, I worked on a variety of projects spanning all fields of study within art history. I cataloged German rare reproductive prints, woodcuts, engravings, that sort of thing, American stereoscopes, Italian Renaissance drawings and sketches, and photography of Roman architecture. So we study all those things. And it was basic cataloging, so with a little bit of research I could fill in the holes where I didn't necessarily have the knowledge. And they have a great library at the National Gallery if you've never been there, which also was very helpful when doing all that cataloging. So basically, I went to grad school. I was doing the Visual Resources Center, and I was working at the National Gallery. So I did that for 2 years. And through my position at the National Gallery, I found out about a position at the Smithsonian American Art Museum. A couple of my colleagues who I worked with at the National Gallery had worked in a certain department at American Art, and the name of the department is the Research and Scholars Center. And that's going to handle, they have several photo archives, they handle the museum's fellowship programs, the internship program, and the one that I worked with the most was their academic journal called American Art. And at American Art, meaning the journal, not the museum specifically, there I gained a lot of experience that had to do with my past positions at the VRC and at the National Gallery. Basically, I helped coordinate all the rights and reproductions for the journal. And what that means is whenever an author would write for the journal, they would go pursue all the copyrights from the artists, photographers, whoever had created the images that we wanted to use, and the museums, institutions, libraries, private collectors who held those items. And it was my job to go through all their paperwork and coordinate, make sure that everything was in order, legally speaking. And my knowledge of intellectual property and the visual arts really did come from my time at the Visual Resources Center. Our then Visual Resources, I guess curator, yeah, was Kathy Albrecht, and she was extremely active in the visual resources community and knew lots about rights and reproductions culture, and she was a font of knowledge and really got me interested in following this field of work. So I got a lot of ideas from her and a lot of knowledge from her, but also I would work a lot with the Office of General Counsel at the Smithsonian, who are the Smithsonian's lawyers. The friendliest group of lawyers you could ever meet. They're really fantastic. And I would speak a lot with them about the intellectual property issues that I'd run into. And I was also at the same time doing my own personal research in that matter, and it was also just kind of luck that at the same time the College Art Association was doing all of their fair use studies and studies about permissions culture and the visual arts. So that also gave me some really good jumping off points. So through that position, I became friends with the Rights and Reproductions Coordinator at the Archives of American Art. We became very good friends, and it was someone with whom I could get very nerdy about copyright talk. So she and I would get together and just talk about all of that, and she's out. And when she actually left that position, she recommended me for her replacement. So I did have to go through the whole Fed jobs, the USA jobs, if anyone's ever had to go through that. I did have to go through that whole thing, but I did make it through and went through the whole interview process and the whole yards, and yeah, so I landed there. Yeah, I think that,
So
as
it
far
sounds
as
like
my circuitous path to get there,
Yeah.
it was very much based on first gaining a little bit of real world experience outside of academia, outside of museums, outside of art history. I just, if you're at all thinking about it and you have the resources, I genuinely recommend if you can take a year, focus on yourself, focus on what it is that you're passionate about within the visual arts. It's never a bad thing. Also, it's not a bad thing to go straight into it either. But I'm just here to tell you that even if you take 4 years off, you can still get back in there.
Right.
Yeah, and my parting words will be networking, 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 because the reasons that I found the jobs that I did were through other people with whom I worked. And they would recommend me then to fill in that next position. And the other thing is get some administrative experience under your belt, working with contracts, working with budgets, that sort of thing, because as much as being in the curatorial department and researching all the time is a lovely position, most museum jobs are not researching all the time. They are, a lot of them are desk jobs, be them registrar jobs, be them working with fellowship departments or internships, or even the administrative department in a museum. There's all sorts of routes you can do, but a lot of them do require that experience. So if you do have an opportunity to hone those skills, I would definitely recommend doing so.
But it also sounds like you're saying that even if you end up having to get a job like your Apple computer job, which at first you think is taking you away from the
Yes.
direction you want, that it can often be turned around and become something that ends up being
Exactly.
useful
I
to you.
never would have imagined that those skills would have come in handy, but Kathy said one of the reasons that she chose me to do the work study program at the Visual Resources Center was because I had the experience with the computers and digital resources that I did.
Yeah, we need.
Yeah, exactly. So you never know how those little weird jobs are going to come back and help you. I can't say working as the door girl at a bar really helped me very much. But yeah, no, there's value to be had in sometimes if you get off that path a little bit, there's often value to be had in the skills that you gain. So.
Thank you. Well, I want to thank all four of you because I think that was incredibly helpful, and I feel like my idea of having this session was just totally rewarded by everything that you all said. So thank you very much. This is your chance if you have some specific questions to ask any of our four panelists. Yeah, Erica.
I have a question for Susan. Susan,
Can you everybody try when you ask the questions to speak loudly, because we're having this great videographer back here, and hopefully the questions need to be, I could repeat them, but it's easier if you just say them.
so I've done some work in development and have a lot of friends in that field, and it's a difficult field to do work-life balance in my experience. How have you negotiated that, and have you found that to be true or not?
I haven't. I mean, there are often evening events. I have a deal with my husband where, like, he has evening events, like we switch off picking up kids, and even for my colleagues who don't have children, we kind of just balance it out and we don't make a ton of money, so there's just that understanding that if you're not working a 60-hour week, so at least at the building museum it hasn't been an issue. I can't speak for other museums and how crazy they get. But.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So both of you talked about the importance of networking, and I have this probably not typical question, but what if, so I got the sense that museum career is very much localized, I would say, but what if I'm not sure where I want to live in the future, because I'm Russian and I lived in England and now I'm in America, and I got an internship last summer at Hermitage, so I don't know which day, I have no idea where the future will take me, so I guess that idea of networking not quite works for me, but I just don't know what networks to create, to form.
But I would just say that networking is not just local. I worked for the American Alliance of Museums for 10 years and saw how people use that organization for their benefit. So they joined, they got on the board of different committees, different registrars committee or curatorial or development, and they had a national network. And there were several people who lost their jobs along the way, like at a high level, mostly they all kind of banded together and said, okay, now we're going to help find this person a job because this is our friend and our person. So I think that's national networking. There also are international museum organizations as well. There are lots of different, there's CAA, there are a ton of organizations that you could get involved in that wouldn't just be so localized.
Can I add to that too? Just with AAM too, networking doesn't necessarily have to be face-to-face. It can also, AAM now has this online community where you can be, talking to people all over the world about things that you are interested in, having to do with museums. And people are constantly writing back and forth to each other. I get an email every morning about everything that's happened on AM. And so if you're interested, in what someone in a museum is doing and you like it, write them an email. That's just, I get emails like that a bunch. I can't visit your show. I'm really interested in it though. I live in California, and can you send me the catalog? And next time we're at the AAM meeting, let's meet up. So.
And AAM is American Association of Museums?
It's a alliance now.
It changed a few years ago.
Now,
too.
what is it?
American
Alliance of Museums.
It's a huge difference, right?
But if you were an intern, you probably couldn't do that. That makes more sense once you've actually got a position somewhere? Or do you think as an intern you could still reach out?
I've gotten emails, I'm researching this person that you put in a show. Can you tell me a little bit about it? Can you send me the brochure, any text you have?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I am always impressed when interns or junior staff reach out to me and just, that's often all it takes is just email and see what happens.
And the networking can happen at conferences as well. At a lot of conferences, specifically CAA, they have mixers kind of for alumni of certain organizations, museums, schools. I know Sam, which is the American Art Museum, has a giant interns and fellows alum breakfast every year. And I see so much meshing of minds there where people, they may have been an intern 10 years ago, are now talking to someone who has a fellowship now. And they're all meeting and working together. And also at conferences, they're all gonna publish their papers beforehand. See what people are writing about, see what people are studying, and if something interests you, go to that panel, talk to them afterwards, email them and say, I'm really interested in what you're doing, let's grab a cup of coffee, something like that. And that networking can happen on a local level, on an international level.
Yeah, there's also a whole variety of museum professionals that have blogs, and they write endlessly, and some of them don't get that much of a response. You can create a relationship and a dialogue with somebody who is enough of a leader in the field that they're constantly publishing and putting ideas out there, and begin to build a relationship that way, even as an intern or as a graduate student or an undergrad.
More questions? Yeah. Amanda.
Hi, Elizabeth, this question's for you. So I actually have a similar set of skills as you do. I read contracts and I determine copyright in my current job. That's not in a museum. But after I finished my degree, I considered trying to find positions in museums where that would, be an asset. But my question is, do you feel, and perhaps you know this is what you want to do for the rest of your career, but do you feel ever that going that route has sort of closed you off to moving into other positions within the museum profession?
That's a really great question because I've often wondered that. But I will say this, I have only been in this position since March of this year, but the whole permissions culture and the way that the field is going, I feel like there's going to be a lot there to engage me for years to come. With that being said, the girl who had the job before me, the one who recommended me for the position, she went on to then work in the executive planning office at the National Museum of American Indian, where she coordinates all intellectual property for the entire museum. So there are different ways to step up, but with that being said, it's also a very dynamic job where you gain a lot of skills. So if, for instance, you wanted to, you may be able to go into more of a registrarial position, or more into admin, publishing. Publications departments of museums often need skills like that, and you're not necessarily the coordinator of the rights and reproductions outgoing. You're planning for them coming in, things like that. So there are other career paths, but yeah, I'm enjoying it as it is right now. Sure.
More questions? Yeah, Fana.
Well, I have a question.
Loudly. Sorry, as much as you can.
I have a question about internships, and a problem I have is I've done many internships in different fields, but the kind of question I have now is, am I better off pursuing another internship and sticking with it and just going that route, or doing, that entry-level job and something random? Like, I don't know. It's a really hard thing for me to decide. And I'm curious, like, if you can offer any advice as far as that.
I mean, I would do both. Apply for jobs and apply for internships. It's hard. Like, I hired an intern, one of my interns recently, but it's hard to say. Like, you may have enough, exactly the right kind of skills. Like, I think both Elizabeth and Olivia talked about, like, just that they just happen to have that skill. Like, so you gain different things, and it might be perfect for some job that you're applying for, or somebody you network with who offers you a job.
Yeah, you're also talking about the choice between like an entry-level job anywhere just to pay the bills versus an internship.
In the museum field, exactly.
Yeah, so that's, sort of your own internal calculations. How long could you do this?
Yeah.
I would think you'd become increasingly selective about your internship. Like, pick out a place, sort of shop around the institution. Is it a curator you want to work with? Do you like what the education department is doing here? is the museum innovative in digital technology? Are they doing creative things that way? So sort of treating one's internship almost like a job opportunity and researching that internship. I mean, you're the only one that will know how much you can endure without getting a paycheck. But if you're going to make a choice between an internship and a fairly entry-level job that's outside the field, be selective about the internship.
And most internships are 20 hours a week. And I've talked to a number of people and said, okay, the way we've got people in the master's program, especially now going through, is so labor intensive in terms of just reading and keeping up with your work. And I know a number of you are also working on the side, that an internship, like on top of that, really? But one of the things I've been suggesting to people is if you can manage on a 20-hour-a-week job for your third year, then you also have time to do a 20-hour-a-week internship, which is what most internships are. So even if you haven't been able to get a lot of internship experience while you're in the program, or as an undergraduate even, it's possible to do that afterwards. I mean, living on 20 hours a week salary depends a lot on what kind of work you're doing, and I understand that. But it's not unreasonable to think about, if there's no job you can walk into, is it possible to get more experience in that way? And you were asking a question about this is a very local panel because they're all alumni who are still in the Washington area. But I think, Paul, you were talking about Sheboygan and some of these other places. But I think that if you are not tied for reasons of family or partnership with somebody who needs to stay in the Washington area, small museums all over the country are much more open to hiring people with a master's degree, maybe not with just a BA. But being willing to move around the country, I think, really opens up your options, rather than saying, oh, I have to be in a big city. And you may say, but I really want to work at the Hirshhorn, but I really want to work at the Smithsonian American, but I really want to work at the National Gallery. But if you're willing to move further, there are more opportunities, I think. And I have friends who went to graduate school with me who only have a master's. I think this is still possible. Who have moved up, who got entry-level jobs and ended up moving up and becoming, full curators at relatively prestigious museums, but just not ones in really big cities. So that's just something to sort of build into your calculus. And the recommendations you can get from people that you worked with as an intern here in Washington work for you out in the larger world as well. So that's another kind of networking from your professors and from people that you work with in internship.
And some of the larger institutions, like the Smithsonian, has a digital volunteering program where they have projects that you can work on your own time in your own house.
Really?
Yeah. So the oral history.
Yeah.
We have a lot of off-site volunteers who work on
doing
flexible transcriptions and stuff like that.
So how would people get to find out about that?
It's on the Smithsonian website. I believe the office
Under volunteering?
Yeah, exactly. And there's opportunities there where you can do that on your free time. Maybe you devote 5 hours on a Saturday morning and you say, this is just going to be my volunteer time where I get this. And it's not like you're just submitting this into the void. They're giving you work and you're just submitting it. You're generally having communication with, for instance, in my institution, you would have direct communication with the oral history archivist. And we only have one, so she's going to be a good contact to have, and she talks really positively about the experience she has with our digital volunteers. So with some of the larger institutions, there might be some creative solutions to maybe taking that entry-level position while also gaining some experience.
So those of you who have a master's degree and are here and are doing something interesting in the museum, would you just stand up for a minute and tell people what you're doing? Come on, Caitlin and Kelly. Who else is here?
I'm Kelly Daly. I graduated in 2015 this year. I work at the Phillips Collection right now. I started in education as an intern. I was there under Margaret and Brooke, focused on alumni of American undergrad. I interned there.
Kelly, turn around and talk to me.
I interned there for a year and then stayed on part-time and did contract work, and now I am the manager of academic programs and partnerships at the Phillips, and I work with their academic programming and partnerships. Yep, that's what I do.
My name is Caitlin. I have met some of you. I am also at the Phillips Collection. I also graduated from here in 2015. I am the executive assistant to the director and the board of trustees at the Phillips, so I do sort of everything. I do publications, development, campaign work, run errands. So I was an intern there for a semester and interned all through grad school while working. So.
Maria, could you tell people what you do, even though it's not in a museum?
Oh, sure, certainly. I'm Maria Mann McDonald, and I was just actually, this is really sad, I wrote down all the dates because I was trying to remember when I graduated going back, but I think I've been teaching now 6 years full time. I had sort of a roundabout way of also figuring out exactly what I wanted to do, and I'm still not sure. I worked at Sotheby's after college in the Americana department, and then moved here and also worked at the Phillips for a year around 2008. And when I was applying for graduate school, I really thought I wanted to go into museum education, and I was a huge fan of the teaching kits, which are amazing. And I still use the Jacob Lawrence one all the time. And then as I started the program here, I think I realized that what I really loved was the education side and the teaching part. So I ended up getting my teaching degree at the same time that I was working on my master's here. And so now I teach AP Art History and AP European History and Humanities at a Catholic high school in Arlington. And then I chair the Fine Arts department there. So I've spent a lot of time in band meetings and trying to foster collaboration between our studio art and our drama and music programs. So that's sort of been my route, and I love it, but I'm sort of at a point where I'm finding that the balance in life is a little difficult teaching. It's pretty common to be at a school 12, 14 hours a day. So you sort of start to wonder, how is that feasible long term and someday with a family? But I find the teaching so rewarding. So, but I would say even when I started teaching part-time, just AP Art History and AP Humanities. And a teacher had to resign for personal reasons, and on Friday I was asked if I would like to start teaching world history, and I said sure. And so on Monday I started teaching world history, and I was a history and art history major in college, but it's been a little while since I taught about Mesopotamia with 2 days notice, but you make it work, and this is probably why I'm a little overwhelmed, but you just take advantage, I think, of those opportunities, and it's the little things here and there that I think end up helping the most. So, yeah.
Anna, do you have a job that you want to talk about now?
Not museum related, which is kind of my own quandary, but I do freelance research for National Geographic magazine. I've been doing that for like 4 years now, which is my problem has been like trying to transfer that into a museum setting, and which is, I guess I'm on my own winding road. But,
Okay, well, thank you so much for coming. We're really happy that you are all here. I hope this has been helpful to you. And now go out and eat